The sound that changed everything wasn't a scream or a siren. It was a clean metallic snap, cutting through a quiet Mesa Vista morning. Bolt cutters biting into the bright orange bar on my steering wheel, a tow truck rumbling in from around the corner like it had been waiting for its cue. I wasn't home to stop it, but the doorbell cam across the street caught the whole performance: the sun visor, the gardening gloves, the little smirk, when the lock fell to the floor mat. That was Lorraine Thatcher, the self-appointed hall monitor of Oak Mesa Reserve, and the Jeep she decided to clean up wasn't just my Jeep. It was assigned to the Tri-County Interdiction Task Group, which is a fancy way of saying, if you mess with it, you're not just messing with me. I moved here for quiet. You know what I mean? After too many midnights in basements and too many stakeouts that smelled like burnt coffee, I wanted sprinklers, warm sidewalks, a little stucco with a honey-colored door where the mesa turns pink at sunset. I wanted to hear nothing and feel safe, the kind of safe that doesn't need to be announced. The day I arrived, I was still sweating through my shirt hauling boxes when Lorraine appeared with a clipboard tucked like a badge, and that smile people wear. When they're about to correct you, she pointed at the garage, the driveway, the Jeep, then at the orange lock, and said, "We like standards here. Most residents park inside, and that thing makes the place look like a crime map." I told her what I tell anyone who asks why I secure a vehicle that matters to my job. It's called not inviting trouble, and I left it at that because I've learned the first day isn't the day to fight. But the clipboard turned. The whispers started. The blinds twitched when I jogged past. And by Tuesday, she marched up with Section 4B circled and a tone that said she wasn't asking. She was announcing. I set my bag down. I kept my voice even. I told her the truth. I work odd hours. The garage is full of boxes and the lock stays. And the street got very quiet in that way that lets you know the whole block is waiting to see who blinks. The next morning, a blue-taped violation letter waited on my door. Improper storage lock, not in accordance with community aesthetic. $100 fine, and I walked it over to Lorraine, asked her not to touch my vehicle. Told her it was tied to my work, and she shook her head like she was swatting a fly. Rules are rules. You can feel when someone decides you're the problem. It's in the way they say community and mean control. It's in how a Jeep becomes a story about safety, then about property values, then about you. And at the HOA meeting, she called it a blight. Without saying my name, talked about image. While staring right through me, I stood in back arms, crossed, and said, "What needed saying? If the image of Oak Mesa is pushing around a new neighbor in week 3, that's a worse look than an orange bar on a steering wheel." She pounded a gavel she brought from home. Yeah, that happened. Promised a vote next week, but the vote never came because Saturday morning she put on gloves, took those cutters out of her garage, staged a tow truck, and crossed a line she didn't even know existed. I was at the office signing off on reports when my phone lit up with 3 missed calls from my neighbor Pete. I called back, and he just said, "You need to get home right now. She's in your Jeep." And by the time I hit the impound lot, a girl behind bulletproof glass was scrolling her phone and telling me the vehicle was marked abandoned. I slid my ID through, leaned in. Kept my voice low, listen. That Jeep is part of a task group. There's equipment and notes inside, if you don't release it. You'll have multiple agencies asking who touched what and why the gum stopped. Mid-chew, the buzzer clicked. The tow driver wandered in with a sunburned neck and an apology ready. I told him if anything was missing, his company would learn new words that start with felony. We checked the mounts and the hidden radio, nothing gone. But the lock, the one loud orange line I draw every day that was snapped and tossed on my mat like a dare. When I rolled back into Oak Mesa, the blinds all turned at once. Pete stood on his porch, shaking his head. She's bragging, man, saying she cleaned up the street. And Lorraine stepped out with her clipboard, tucked like a shield, and told me, sweet as a trap, I see you retrieved your vehicle. And I told her, steady, you trespassed on my property, destroyed my equipment, tampered with my car that isn't HOA business that's criminal. She lifted her chin and said, our rules come first. I took a step closer and kept it quiet enough that she had to lean in. That Jeep is tied to an active task group. You interfered with law enforcement, prove it. She said, like a dare, and I didn't have to. The unmarked sedans and the black SUV did it for me. Lieutenant Dana Whitaker took one look at the snapped lock I'd saved in a grocery bag and rubbed her temples. Tell me, this didn't happen. I wish I could, Agent Ron. Keegan said, charge her. Dana said, we do it clean loop in the DA, be right. Even when you're right. And then they turned to Lorraine, who introduced herself with title first, Vice President of Oak Mesa Reserve, which told everyone in earshot. What mattered most to her, she started with standards and image. Ron laughed without humor. It was a government vehicle that wasn't courage, that was a crime, and the neighbors who used to nod along at her lectures found the cracks in the sidewalk more interesting than her face. By Monday, the doorbell video leaked. Bolt cutters. Snap tow chain. Smug wave. A 15-second clip that makes your blood move. The news trucks parked by the gate. Reporters asked if I thought I'd been targeted. Yes, I said. Then went inside and shut the door. Because at some point, the story stops. Needing more words from you. The board called an emergency meeting, folding chairs on linoleum, that church basement sound. And for the first time in years, the gavel worked against Lorraine. Calvin Dorsey looked like a man who'd just learned the word liability. He said, you overstepped. She said, I protected us. Gloria from 2 streets over said it protected us from what, a parked car. And Pete said, you made it personal. There's a difference between rules and punishment. The room exhaled like a town finally letting go. Calvin suspended her pending investigation, and she stormed out, muttering about betrayal. Clipboard clutched so tight, you'd think it was holding her ribs together. Midweek. The DA said they were reviewing charges, and the neighborhood changed color. Cameras came back. Kids on bikes took the middle of the street again. Sonny from 2 houses down brought me a blueberry pie and said, you didn't deserve this. And I told her I'm not sure deserve has much to do with it. Some people learn respect by receiving it. Some only learn it when they run out of it. A few weeks later, the decision landed. 2 misdemeanors, criminal mischief, and interference fines, restitution for the damaged community service on the side of Route 550 in a fluorescent vest. And no, I didn't slow down when I drove past on my way to an interview. Not to gloat, not to glare, because this wasn't a victory parade. It was a correction. Oak. Mesa held a new election. The board promised cooperation instead of punishment. We added a line about discretion to the bylaws, the kind that forces you to look a neighbor in the eye before you write a ticket. The Jeep sits in my driveway now with that same loud orange lock. And funny thing, nobody says a word. Nobody pretends. An orange bar makes a crime map appear. People ask what the story is really about, and I tell them it's not about metal or toe chains. It's about pride dressed up as principle, about how authority rots when it never brushes against humility, about a neighborhood remembering. It's a neighborhood, not a courtroom, and about a man who thought quiet meant staying invisible and learned that sometimes you have to be seen to stay safe. The twist, if there is one, is simple. Once the cameras showed the bolt cutters and the unmarked cars showed the badges, people found their voices. And it makes you wonder if the Jeep hadn't belonged to a task group. Would anyone have cared if the clip hadn't gone viral? Would the board have found its spine? And how many cul-de-sacs run on fear, dressed up as standards, you know what I mean? Maybe Lorraine was enforcing rules. Maybe she was enforcing her bias. Maybe the board stood up because it found a moral line. Maybe it stood because the spotlight burned too hot. I don't pretend to know what sat in their chests the night they voted. I just know the air here feels lighter now that peace didn't arrive because of a paragraph in a binder. It arrived because people stopped using that binder like a weapon. That's where I'll leave it open, because life doesn't tie itself in bows. Was this justice or just relief? Did the system go too soft? Or just right? Have you lived through a HOA power trip? Or watched a neighborhood turn on someone because it was easier than speaking up? Tell me below. Argue with me if you want. I can take it. And if stories like this make you feel something, hit subscribe, hit like, and drop your own experience in the comments. What's right? What's wrong? Where's the line between order and control? Your voice is part of the verdict now.